Step out of the truck before I drag you out myself. Officer Daniel Mercer's voice cut through the rain like a blade against steel. The truck stop fell quiet except for the low hiss of diesel engines idling beneath the storm. Red and blue lights washed across the side of the 18-wheeler in violent pulses, reflecting off chrome mirrors and wet asphalt like broken glass. Nia Brooks kept both hands on the steering wheel. Calm. Steady. The cabin smelled faintly of black coffee, motor oil, and the lavender hand lotion she used to keep her cracked knuckles from bleeding during long hauls. Mercer aimed his flashlight through the driver's side window again, the beam lingering on her face longer than necessary. License and registration, he said. Now. Nia reached slowly toward the dashboard compartment. Rain hammered the windshield hard enough to blur the entire highway beyond the truck stop. A pair of young officers stood near the rear tires whispering to each other, laughing under their breath. One of them held up a phone, casually recording. Dispatch said this truck crossed state lines twice in under 12 hours, Mercer muttered. That usually means somebody's hiding something. Nia handed him the paperwork without a word. Mercer glanced at the Illinois plates, then at her CDL. His jaw tightened slightly when he read the name. Nia Brooks, he said aloud. You hauling alone tonight? That's how trucking works most nights, she replied quietly. Her voice stayed level, almost too calm for someone surrounded by flashing lights and armed officers. That calm irritated him more than fear would have. Mercer stepped back from the window and swept his flashlight across the cabin interior. Everything was unnaturally organized. No trash, no loose clothes, no fast food wrappers. Just a folded road atlas, a silver thermos, and a small framed picture clipped beside the radio. A little boy smiling in a baseball jersey. The words written beneath the photo were faded but visible when the flashlight hit them. Come home safe, Mom. Mercer's expression flickered for half a second before hardening again. Step out of the vehicle, he ordered. Nia opened the cab door slowly. Her boots landed on the soaked pavement with a heavy splash. She stood tall despite the cold wind cutting across the truck stop. 5'9". Broad shoulders beneath a dark denim jacket. The reflective stripes along her cargo pants glowed under the police lights. Mercer circled her once like he was inspecting a machine instead of a person. You nervous, Ms. Brooks? He asked. Should I be? She answered. One of the younger officers snorted. Mercer ignored him. Mind if we search the truck? You already decided you were going to. Another silence settled over the highway. Somewhere nearby, an air brake released with a long mechanical sigh. A trucker fueling 2 pumps away glanced over before quickly looking back down at his receipt. Nobody wanted trouble with highway patrol after midnight. Mercer climbed into the cab while the other officers opened side compartments and checked storage bins. Rainwater dripped from their uniforms onto the pavement. Nia stood motionless beneath the storm, hands folded in front of her, watching every movement without appearing to watch at all. Then Mercer noticed something strange. Mounted just above the sleeper compartment was a tiny black lens no larger than a shirt button. Ahí den cámara. His eyes narrowed. He opened another compartment and found a thick black notebook secured beneath the passenger seat with a steel latch. Inside were pages filled with dates, license plates, highway mile markers, and coded initials written in precise block lettering. Mercer's pulse slowed. This wasn't normal trucker paperwork. Not even close. Outside, thunder rolled low across the Texas sky. Nia looked toward the far edge of the truck stop where an unmarked white cargo van sat near the diesel pumps. Its back doors were shut tight. Too tight. Through the rain-streaked darkness, she caught the brief outline of a young girl's face pressed against the tinted glass before disappearing again. Mercer stepped down from the cab holding the notebook in one hand. Water streamed from the brim of his hat. What exactly are you hauling tonight, Ms. Brooks? He asked softly. Nia met his eyes without blinking. Depends, she said. You asking as a cop or as someone already involved? The wind seemed to leave the entire truck stop at once. Even the younger officers stopped moving. Mercer stared at her, unreadable now. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed across the empty highway, growing closer through the storm. The younger officers exchanged uneasy glances as thunder cracked somewhere above the interstate. Rainwater streamed down the side of the trailer in silver ribbons, pulling around Nia Brooks' boots while the red and blue lights continued flashing across the soaked truck stop like warning signals nobody fully understood yet. Officer Daniel Mercer kept the black notebook in his hand, but no longer looked confident holding it. He flipped through another page slowly. Every line inside was detailed with exact timestamps, highway exits, fuel stops, and partial plate numbers. Some entries had small stars drawn beside them. Others were circled in red ink. Mercer looked back up at Nia carefully this time. "What does this mean?" he asked. Nia tilted her head slightly as cold rain dripped from the edge of her hood. "You tell me," she replied. Mercer stared at her another second before motioning toward the patrol SUV. "You are going to explain this downtown." One of the younger deputies stepped closer. "You want me to cuff her?" Mercer hesitated. The question hung in the wet night air longer than it should have. Nia noticed it immediately. He was unsure now. Good. Fear was easier to predict than uncertainty. "No," Mercer finally muttered. "Not yet." He handed the notebook to Deputy Collins instead and climbed halfway back into the truck cab, searching deeper this time. The smell inside the sleeper compartment was clean and sharp, almost military. "No clatter. No personal mess. Just discipline." Mercer unzipped a side storage bag and froze again. Inside sat a compact police scanner modified with encrypted frequencies. Beneath it was a folded map of Texas covered in handwritten markings along Interstate 10 and Interstate 35. Certain truck stops had been highlighted repeatedly. One location near Odessa had been circled so many times the paper was beginning to tear. Mercer slowly exhaled through his nose. "Who are you?" he whispered, mostly to himself. Outside, Nia's eyes drifted back toward the white cargo van parked near the far diesel pumps. The vehicle had not moved once. Its headlights remained off despite the storm. She could feel eyes watching from inside it. The same feeling had followed her for nearly 3 months across highways, rest stops, way stations, and freight yards stretching from Arizona to Louisiana. Patterns. Faces. Deliveries that never matched the manifests. Girls disappearing near county lines where cameras somehow stopped working. A trucker learned to notice things after enough lonely miles on American roads. Especially a trucker nobody bothered looking at twice. Deputy Collins approached, holding the notebook carefully away from the rain. "Sheriff Colton is on his way," he said quietly. Mercer looked irritated. "Who called him?" Collins shrugged. "Dispatch said he wanted in personally after your plate check flagged the truck." Nia lowered her gaze slightly to hide the reaction in her eyes. That happened faster than expected. Too fast. The operation was moving before the task force wanted it to. Mercer stepped back down from the cab and shut the door harder than necessary. "You ever been arrested before?" he asked her suddenly. "No funny. You look too comfortable standing beside police lights." Nia almost smiled at that. Almost. Maybe I have learned what panic costs. The younger officers shifted awkwardly while the rain intensified again. Somewhere beyond the truck stop, 18 wheels roared past on the interstate, spraying water into the darkness. A trucker inside a nearby diner pressed his face briefly against the glass before stepping back out of sight. Nobody stayed curious long around county deputies after midnight. Mercer rubbed rainwater from his jaw and glanced again toward the white cargo van. "Who is in that vehicle?" he asked. Nia answered too quickly. "You tell me." His eyes narrowed immediately. There it was again. That same controlled calm. Like she already knew every move before it happened. Then a new sound cut through the storm. Tires crunching over wet gravel. Headlights swung across the truck stop entrance as a black sheriff. Department SUV rolled slowly toward them. The moment Deputy Collins saw it, his posture straightened instantly. Mercer's jaw tightened. Sheriff Wade Colton stepped out wearing a tan raincoat over his uniform, broad shoulders moving with the easy confidence of a man used to controlling every room he entered. Rain rolled off the brim of his hat while his eyes settled directly on Nia Brooks before anyone even spoke. Not on the truck. Not on Mercer. Her. And for the first time all night, Nia felt the atmosphere change completely. The game had finally reached the wrong player. Sheriff Wade Colton walked through the rain without hurrying, his polished boots splashing through shallow puddles beneath the flashing patrol lights. The storm bent around him instead of slowing him down. Deputy Collins lowered his eyes immediately when the sheriff approached, clutching the black notebook tighter against his chest like he suddenly regretted touching it at all. Officer Mercer straightened beside the truck, trying to recover the authority he had carried only minutes earlier. "Sheriff," Mercer said, "we found some unusual equipment inside the vehicle." Colton did not answer right away. His gaze remained fixed on Nia Brooks. Cold, measuring, familiar in a way that tightened something deep in her chest. She had seen that expression before on men who smiled during church on Sundays and buried evidence on Mondays. The sheriff stopped 3 feet in front of her. Rain rolled from the edge of his hat onto the shoulder of his coat. "You picked a dangerous county to drive through alone," he said calmly. Nia kept her hands folded in front of her jacket. Road signs did not mention that. One of the younger deputies let out a nervous laugh before falling silent again when Colton glanced sideways at him. The sheriff extended his hand toward Collins without looking. "Notebook." Collins handed it over immediately. Colton flipped through the pages slowly beneath the highway lights. The sound of wet paper turning seemed unusually loud in the storm. Nia watched his face carefully. "No surprise. No confusión." He recognized the entries. That confirmed it. Mercer stepped closer. "There is more inside." "The cab," he said.
"Encrypted scanner, coded maps, hidden camera setup."
"I think she is running something bigger than freight." Colton finally looked up from the notebook. "Do you now?" Mercer hesitated at the tone. The sheriff closed the notebook gently instead of angrily, which somehow felt worse. "Ms. Brooks," Colton said softly, "you mind telling me why your truck contains surveillance logs connected to half the interstate corridor in West Texas?" Nia glanced briefly toward the cargo van near the diesel pumps. It still had not moved. Water streamed down its black windshield in uneven lines. Somewhere inside that vehicle, somebody was waiting to see how this ended. "Maybe I pay attention," she replied. Colton's jaw shifted slightly. Most truckers pay attention to speed traps, not law enforcement movement patterns. Another silence settled over the truck stop. Mercer folded his arms tighter against the cold rain. He was beginning to realize the conversation had moved beyond him entirely. Nia noticed that too. Good officers asked questions. Corrupt ones protected territory. And Sheriff Wade Colton had entered this scene like a man protecting ownership. A gust of wind swept across the fuel station hard enough to rattle the hanging signs above the diesel pumps. The smell of wet asphalt mixed with burned coffee drifting from the diner across the lot. Through the fogged windows, a waitress quietly flipped the closed sign even though several customers were still inside. Fear moved fast in small towns. Colton stepped closer to Nia until the flashing red and blue lights painted both their faces in alternating colors. "You know what I think?" he asked. "I think you crossed into my county looking for trouble." Nia met his stare evenly. "And if I was?" Mercer looked between them carefully now. The tension no longer felt like a traffic stop. It felt personal. Colton smiled then, but it never reached his eyes. "Then you made a mistake." He handed the notebook back to Collins and turned slightly toward Mercer. "Search the trailer completely. Every inch." Mercer nodded and motioned for the deputies to move. 2 officers headed toward the rear doors of the 18-wheeler, while another retrieved bolt cutters from the patrol SUV. Nia's breathing remained slow and controlled, but inside her pulse had begun ticking faster. The trailer was clean. It had to be clean. Federal teams had swept it before she crossed the county line. But if Colton was desperate enough, evidence could appear anywhere. Mercer paused before following the others. "Sheriff," he said quietly, "what about the cargo van over there?" For the first time since arriving, Colton's expression hardened openly. Just for a second. "What about it?" Mercer glanced toward the vehicle. "It has been sitting there a while." Colton's voice turned flat. "Then leave it alone." Nia noticed the exact moment uncertainty entered Mercer's face again. Small. Barely visible. But enough. Thunder rolled low above the interstate while the deputies reached the trailer doors. One of them slid the metal latch loose. The heavy lock clanged against steel. Then from somewhere inside the trailer came a single muffled sound that did not belong there at all. A human cough. The sound was faint but unmistakable. A human cough. Vet. Weak. Trapped somewhere behind the steel trailer doors. Every deputy near the truck froze at the exact same moment. Rain tapped against metal louder now, mixing with the distant growl of diesel engines rolling down Interstate 20. Officer Mercer turned sharply toward the trailer. "Open it," he ordered. Sheriff Colton stepped forward immediately. "Hold on." His voice stayed calm, but the calm came too fast. Too rehearsed. Mercer looked back at him. "You heard that, right?" Colton adjusted the brim of his rain-soaked hat slowly. "Probably an animal. Freight trucks pick up strays all the time." Nia watched the exchange carefully from beneath the flashing patrol lights. Her face remained unreadable, but inside, every instinct sharpened. Something had changed. Mercer no longer looked completely loyal to the sheriff. Doubt had entered the room, and doubt was dangerous once it started breathing. Deputy Collins reached for the trailer handle again, but Colton stopped him with a single look. "I said wait." The younger deputy pulled his hand back instantly. Mercer frowned. "Sheriff, if there is somebody inside, then we follow procedure," Colton interrupted. "County inspection first." Nia almost smiled at that. Procedure. Funny word. Most people only cared about procedure when the truth threatened them. Another cough drifted from inside the trailer. This time louder. One deputy took an unconscious step backward. Mercer's eyes narrowed hard. "That does not sound like cargo." The rain intensified suddenly, pounding against the truck roof and washing streams of water across the fuel station pavement. Somewhere across the lot, the white cargo van finally turned its headlights on. The beams cut through the storm in pale yellow streaks. Nia noticed immediately. So did Colton. The sheriff glanced toward the van for barely half a second, but it was enough. Mercer caught it too. Tiny moments told bigger truths than words ever could. The sheriff straightened his posture. "Everybody calm down," he said evenly. "Ms. Brooks has already demonstrated she likes creating confusion." Nia tilted her head slightly. Interesting choice of words. Colton ignored her. "Deputy Collins, escort her to the patrol SUV." Collins hesitated this time. "Sir." "Now." Collins approached carefully. "Ma'am, I need you to come with me." Nia did not resist. She walked toward the SUV slowly, boots splashing through shallow puddles while the cold wind pushed rain sideways across the truck stop. As she passed Mercer, she lowered her voice just enough for only him to hear. "Ask yourself why he is scared of opening my trailer but not theirs." Mercer's jaw tightened. Nia slid into the back seat of the patrol SUV without another word. The interior smelled like wet leather, stale coffee, and the faint chemical scent of dashboard cleaner. Rainwater crawled down the windows in twisting lines, distorting the flashing lights outside into blurred streaks of red and blue. Through the glass, she watched Mercer remain standing near the trailer instead of following orders immediately. Good. He was thinking now. Thinking complicated everything. Colton walked directly toward Mercer, speaking low enough that the deputies could not hear over the storm. But Nia did not need the words. Body language was enough. The sheriff's shoulders were stiff, defensive. Mercer crossed his arms and shook his head once. Arguing already. Faster than expected. Then Nia's eyes shifted toward the cargo van again. The headlights remained on now. Engine running. Ready to leave. A shadow moved briefly behind the tinted passenger window. Small frame. Possibly female. Her pulse slowed instead of rising. Fear made people rush. Training made people patient. She lowered her hand casually toward the seam inside her denim jacket and pressed 2 fingers lightly against the hidden transmitter stitched beneath the fabric. One click. Silent. Simple. A signal only one person would understand. Somewhere beyond county lines, Agent Elena Torres would receive it immediately. Operation compromised. Accelerate timeline. Outside, Mercer suddenly turned away from Colton and walked straight toward the cargo van instead of the trailer. The sheriff's voice cracked through the storm behind him. "Daniel." Mercer kept walking. The deputies exchanged nervous glances. Rain poured harder across the asphalt while the van's engine revved slightly. Too late now. The moment was already moving. Mercer stopped 10 feet from the driver's side door and placed one hand near his holster. "Turn the engine off," he called out. No response came from inside the van. Only the low rumble of the motor vibrating beneath the rain. Mercer stepped closer. "I said turn it off." Then the rear brake lights suddenly flashed bright red. The cargo van lurched backward so suddenly that water sprayed from beneath the tires in long gray arcs across the pavement. Officer Mercer jumped sideways instinctively as the engine roared louder against the storm. "Turn it off now," he shouted again, one hand raised toward the windshield. The driver ignored him. The van reversed hard, cutting sharply around the diesel pumps while deputies scrambled backward out of its path. Red brake lights reflected violently across the rain-soaked truck stop, turning the entire lot into a blur of flashing crimson and police blue. Sheriff Colton's voice thundered across the chaos. "Do not pursue." Mercer spun around. "What?" Colton stepped forward fast beneath the rain, jaw tight with controlled anger. "I said stand down." Another deputy pointed toward the moving van. "Sheriff, there could be somebody in there. And there could be armed traffickers." Colton snapped back instantly. "You want civilians caught in the middle of that?" The words sounded reasonable. Too reasonable. Like a speech rehearsed before the storm even started. Mercer looked from the sheriff to the van disappearing toward the edge of the truck stop entrance. Doubt deepened visibly across his face now. Meanwhile, inside the patrol SUV, Nia Brooks sat perfectly still watching water race down the windows and twisting rivers. Her pulse remained steady despite the accelerating timeline outside. She had spent 11 weeks driving freight routes across 4 states waiting for one mistake from Colton's network. Tonight they had finally made it. The hidden transmitter beneath her jacket vibrated once against her ribs. Confirmation signal received. Federal teams were moving. She lowered her gaze slightly, hiding the faint shift in her expression. Outside, Mercer was no longer listening carefully to the sheriff. He was watching him. That mattered more. The cargo van reached the edge of the truck stop entrance and hesitated for half a second before speeding onto the frontage road beside the interstate. Mercer cursed under his breath. "We are just letting them go?" Colton walked toward him slowly. Rain streamed down both sides of his face now, but his voice remained controlled. "You are letting your imagination get ahead of evidence." Mercer shook his head once. "There was somebody inside that trailer too. And we will inspect it. Then why stop us?" Colton's eyes hardened. The surrounding deputies fell silent immediately. Nobody moved. Nobody even pretended to work anymore. The storm had turned the entire truck stop into a courtroom waiting for somebody to lie first. "Because I am still the sheriff here," Colton said quietly. Mercer held his stare longer than before. Dangerous move. Nia noticed it instantly through the rain-covered window. Mercer had crossed an invisible line now. Maybe he did not realize it yet, but Colton definitely did. Deputy Collins jogged back from the trailer, breathing harder than before. "Sheriff," he said carefully, "there is definitely someone in there." The entire lot went still again. Collins swallowed visibly. Young female. Maybe 16 or 17. Mercer looked stunned. "Open the trailer." Colton answered immediately. No, even the rain suddenly seemed quieter after that word. Mercer stared at him in disbelief. "Sheriff, are you hearing yourself right now?" Colton stepped closer until they were nearly shoulder to shoulder beneath the flashing lights. "You are tired, Daniel. You are cold. And you are letting a suspicious truck driver manipulate you." Mercer glanced toward the patrol SUV where Nia sat watching calmly from behind wet glass. "She never said there was a girl in there." Colton's expression flickered for the first time. Tiny. Fast. But real. Mercer saw it. So did Nia. The sheriff realized his mistake 1 second too late. He had assumed information nobody officially shared. A low static burst crackled suddenly from Mercer's radio clipped to his shoulder. Then another voice came through distorted beneath the storm. "Unit 7 respond immediately. Multiple federal vehicles entering county line from East Corridor." Silence. Complete silence. Deputy Collins slowly looked toward the highway beyond the truck stop. Red lights. Different pattern. Different vehicles. Moving fast through the rain. Mercer's eyes widened slightly. Colton did not turn around right away. He simply closed his eyes once like a man hearing the beginning of his own collapse. Inside the SUV, Nia finally allowed herself one slow breath. Then she whispered softly to nobody at all. "Right on time." The federal convoy appeared through the rain like a moving wall of white headlights cutting across the dark Texas highway. Black SUVs rolled off the interstate shoulder one after another, tires spraying water across the frontage road, while red emergency strobes flashed against the storm clouds overhead. Every deputy at the truck stop stiffened instantly. The atmosphere changed so fast it felt like the oxygen had been pulled from the air. Sheriff Wade Colton finally turned toward the highway, but the expression on his face was no longer controlled confidence. It was calculation. Fast, desperate calculation. Officer Mercer watched him carefully now, no longer trying to hide the suspicion in his eyes. The radio on his shoulder crackled again. Federal task force on scene. All county personnel stand by. Deputy Collins looked pale beneath the flashing lights. Sheriff, what is going on? Colton ignored the question. Instead, his gaze snapped toward the patrol SUV where Nia Brooks sat behind rain-covered glass. For the first time all night, he looked uncertain around her. That alone told Mercer everything he needed to know. The sheriff took one step toward the SUV before Mercer moved directly into his path. You knew, Mercer said quietly. Colton's eyes narrowed. Move. You knew about the van. Rain pounded harder across the truck stop roof while diesel engines idled in the background like distant thunder. The deputies shifted nervously between the two men. Nobody wanted to pick a side yet. Colton lowered his voice. Daniel, you do not understand the situation. Then explain it. The sheriff glanced once toward the approaching federal vehicles and made his decision instantly. This woman is not what she seems. Inside the SUV, Nia almost smiled at that. Mercer folded his arms tighter against the cold wind. Neither are you. The silence that followed stretched painfully long. Then the first federal SUV stopped near the diesel pumps. Doors opened immediately. Men and women wearing dark tactical jackets stepped out into the rain with calm, controlled precision. No panique. No yelling. Just movement. Efficient and deliberate. Their jackets carried 3 white letters across the chest. FBI. Deputy Collins swallowed hard. One of the younger officers quietly lowered the phone he had been using earlier to record the traffic stop. Nobody laughed anymore. The lead federal agent stepped forward beneath the storm, water running from the brim of her black cap. Agent Elena Torres. Sharp eyes. Steady posture. She scanned the entire scene once before locking directly onto the patrol SUV. Where is Nia Brooks? She asked. Sheriff Colton answered first. This is county jurisdiction. Agent. Torres never even looked at him. Not anymore. Mercer felt something shift deep in his stomach at the way she said it. Like the ending had already been written hours ago, and only he had arrived late to the story. Torres motioned toward the SUV. Open the door. Deputy Collins hesitated and looked at Colton. Big mistake. Torres noticed immediately. Deputy, she said calmly, if you continue taking orders from him after this moment, your attorney is going to hate you later. Collins moved fast after that. He opened the rear SUV door, and Nia stepped out slowly into the rain. The flashing lights reflected across her denim jacket and tired eyes while cold wind pushed strands of wet hair across her face. She looked nothing like the dangerous criminal Mercer had imagined earlier. Just exhausted, focused, human. Agent Torres walked directly toward her and handed over a small waterproof case. You are late, Nia said softly. Torres glanced toward the sheriff. Traffic. Mercer stared at Nia in disbelief. Who are you? Nia opened the case carefully. Inside sat a federal badge and a compact radio unit sealed in plastic against the rain. Around the truck stop, deputies exchanged stunned looks with one another. Sheriff Colton's face darkened immediately. This is a mistake, he snapped. She has been impersonating law enforcement. Nia finally looked directly at him again. Calm. Steady. No, she replied quietly. I have been documenting it. The storm rolled heavily across the interstate while Agent Torres signaled 2 federal agents toward the trailer. Open it, she ordered. This time nobody stopped them. The metal door swung outward slowly beneath the rain. Inside, huddled beneath blankets beside stacked freight boxes, sat a frightened teenage girl shielding her eyes from the sudden lights. Mercer's breath caught. Deputy Collins looked physically sick. And Sheriff Wade Colton stopped speaking entirely. The teenage girl flinched against the trailer wall as federal agents climbed carefully into the freight compartment beneath the flashing lights. She could not have been older than 16. Her oversized gray hoodie hung loose around trembling shoulders, and her face looked pale beneath the cold fluorescent beam from a federal flashlight. One of the agents knelt slowly a few feet away, keeping his voice calm. "You are safe now." Outside, the rain continued pouring across the truck stop roof in steady waves while nobody around Sheriff Wade Colton seemed sure where to stand anymore. Deputies who had spent years following his orders now avoided looking directly at him. The storm had washed something away tonight. Authority maybe. Illusion definitely. Officer Daniel Mercer remained frozen beside the open trailer doors, staring inside at the frightened girl like his brain was struggling to catch up with his eyes. Nia Brooks stepped beside him quietly, water dripping from the edge of her jacket sleeves. "Her name is Lily," she said. Mercer turned sharply toward her. "You knew she was in there?" "Not exactly." "Then how?" Nia watched the federal agents help the girl wrap herself in a thermal blanket. "Patterns," she answered softly. "Girls disappearing near county way stations. Drivers changing routes after midnight. Vans without registration stickers crossing state lines every Thursday." Mercer rubbed rainwater from his face slowly. "And all this time you were investigating us?" Nia looked at him for a long moment before answering. "Not all of you." That landed harder than she intended. Mercer lowered his eyes briefly. Around them, federal teams moved quickly through the truck stop, photographing vehicles, securing radios, checking plates, collecting phones from nervous deputies who suddenly looked much younger than before. The younger officer who had live-streamed the traffic stop earlier quietly deleted the video while glancing over his shoulder every few seconds. Fear had replaced arrogance now. It usually did once cameras pointed the other direction. Sheriff Colton finally stepped forward again. "This proves nothing," he said sharply. Agent Torres turned toward him without emotion. "You want to try that sentence again after we search your office?" Colton's jaw tightened. "You are making a mistake."
No, Torres replied calmly.
The mistake was assuming nobody was paying attention. Nia watched Colton carefully. He still was not panicking. That worried her more than if he had started yelling. Men like him survive by staying calm long after other people lost control. Mercer seemed to realize the same thing. "Sheriff," he said slowly, "why did you stop us from opening the trailer?" Colton looked directly at him. "Because somebody around here needed to think clearly." Mercer shook his head once. "No. You knew she was inside." Silence. Rain hammered the metal trailer roof hard enough to vibrate through the air between them. One of the federal agents escorted Lily carefully toward a heated SUV parked near the pumps. As she passed Nia, the girl paused for half a second. Her frightened eyes lifted slowly. "You are the truck lady," she whispered. Nia nodded once. Lily swallowed hard. "I heard them talking about you." Mercer's eyes shifted immediately. "Who?" The girl looked down at the wet pavement. "The men in the van." A heavy stillness settled across the lot again. Nia crouched slightly to keep her voice gentle. "What did they say?" Lily pulled the thermal blanket tighter around herself. "They said if the black truck driver crossed county lines tonight, Sheriff Colton would handle it." Nobody moved after that. Not Mercer. Not the deputies. Not even Colton for one dangerous second. The storm seemed to disappear entirely beneath the weight of those words. Mercer slowly turned toward the sheriff. Real fear entered his face for the first time all night. Not fear of Nia. Fear of understanding how close he had come to protecting the wrong side. Colton exhaled once through his nose and adjusted his soaked raincoat calmly. "She is scared," he said. "Kids say things." Agent Torres stepped forward immediately. "And corrupt sheriffs usually do too." Two federal agents moved quietly to either side of Colton. The sheriff noticed but did not react outwardly. Instead, his eyes settled back on Nia again. Cold. Measuring. "You think this ends tonight?" he asked her softly. Nia met his stare without blinking. "No," she replied. "I think tonight is just the part where people finally stop ignoring it." Somewhere beyond the truck stop, another line of federal vehicles rolled across the interstate through the rain, their lights stretching endlessly against the dark Texas highway. The rain finally began to soften just before dawn. fading from violent sheets into a cold, steady drizzle that coated the truck stop in silver reflections and exhausted silence. Federal floodlights now illuminated the entire lot. Every vehicle had been repositioned. Every deputy stood separated beneath supervision while agents photographed trailers, radios, notebooks, and fuel receipts spread across folding tables near the diner entrance. The smell of diesel mixed with wet coffee and overheated generators humming beside the command vehicles. Nia Brooks stood near the rear of her truck with a thermal blanket draped loosely over her shoulders, though she barely noticed the cold anymore. Her eyes looked tired now that the adrenaline had started leaving her system. 11 weeks undercover across lonely highways could do that to a person. You stopped sleeping normally. Stopped trusting silence. Stopped remembering what ordinary felt like. Agent Elena Torres approached carrying 2 paper coffee cups. Steam curled into the cold morning air. Black. No sugar, Torres said, handing one over. Nia accepted it quietly. The paper cup warmed her hands instantly. Across the lot, Sheriff Wade Colton sat inside the back of a federal SUV, separated from the deputies he once commanded. Even from this distance he still looked composed. That unsettled Mercer more than handcuffs ever could have. Officer Daniel Mercer leaned against the hood of his patrol vehicle nearby, staring at the soaked pavement beneath his boots. He had barely spoken in 20 minutes. One of the younger deputies tried twice to approach him before thinking better of it. Nobody knew where loyalty was supposed to go anymore. Nia noticed Mercer glance toward her several times before finally walking over. Slow. Hesitant. Like a man approaching a truth he was not sure he deserved to hear. You could have told me, he said quietly. Nia looked out toward the interstate where headlights drifted through the rain like ghosts. Would you have believed me? Mercer opened his mouth then stopped. The answer sat too heavily between them. He rubbed one hand across his tired face. I profiled you. Nia stayed silent. The second I saw you driving that truck alone. He shook his head once. I already had a story in my mind. Her coffee cup warmed against her palms while the storm clouds slowly broke apart overhead. Most people do, she replied softly. Mercer looked genuinely ashamed now. Not performative. Not defensive. Just tired in the way people looked after realizing they had ignored something ugly inside themselves for too long. You stayed calm the whole time, he said. Even when we treated you like a criminal. Nia finally looked directly at him. Because getting emotional around people looking for an excuse can get you hurt. That sentence landed harder than anything else she had said all night. Mercer lowered his eyes immediately. Somewhere behind them, Lily sat inside a heated federal vehicle wrapped in fresh clothes while a female agent helped her sip hot chocolate from a foam cup. The girl looked small against the oversized seatbelt crossing her chest. Human again instead of evidence. Nia watched her quietly. She has family in New Mexico, Torres said beside her. We found them about an hour ago. Nia nodded once, relief passing briefly across her face before disappearing again beneath exhaustion. Mercer noticed that too. You have kids? He asked carefully. Nia reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out the small photograph from inside the truck cab. Riley Brooks grinning in his baseball uniform beneath bright summer sunlight. 11 years old. Missing front tooth. Pure joy frozen in time. Mercer studied the picture silently. He thinks I just haul freight, Nia said. Safer that way. The wind shifted softly through the truck stop, carrying the distant sound of 18-wheelers moving eastbound toward Sunrise. Normal traffic. Normal life continuing while this place still felt suspended between truth and collapse. Mercer handed the photo back carefully. I owe you an apology. Nia slipped the picture back into her pocket. Maybe, she answered. But that is not the part that matters. He frowned slightly. Then what does? Nia looked toward the deputies standing separated beneath federal supervision. Young officers. Nervous faces. Men who had followed the wrong leader because it felt easier than asking difficult questions. What matters, she said quietly, is whether tonight changes anything after the cameras leave. Mercer followed her gaze slowly. The silence stretched between them while dawn finally began bleeding pale orange through the storm clouds over the Texas highway. For the first time since the stop began, nobody looked powerful anymore. Just human. Morning settled slowly over the truck stop like the aftermath of a storm, Nobody fully understood yet. The rain had stopped completely now, leaving only water dripping from fuel canopies, and the low mechanical hum of refrigerated trailers idling beneath a pale Texas sunrise. Federal agents continued moving through the lot with quiet efficiency, loading sealed evidence boxes into black SUVs while tired deputies stood nearby answering questions they never imagined hearing from federal investigators. The flashing lights were gone now. That somehow made everything feel more serious. Nia Brooks sat alone on the metal steps beneath her truck cab, both hands wrapped around a fresh cup of diner coffee that had long since cooled. Her eyes followed the endless line of semis moving across the interstate beyond the truck stop. Freight never stopped moving in America. Not for storms. Not for scandals. Not even for truth. Agent Elena Torres emerged from the diner carrying a thick folder tucked beneath one arm. "We got warrants signed," she said quietly. "County offices. Storage units. 3 additional properties connected to Colton." Nia nodded once without looking away from the highway. "And the van? Recovered 20 miles east. Abandoned near Odessa." Torres paused briefly. There were signs more girls had been transported recently. Nia lowered her gaze toward the coffee cup in her hands. That part never got easier. The empty spaces. The unknown numbers. The people nobody noticed disappearing because they came from places society stopped paying attention to years ago. Torres leaned against the truck beside her. "You did good work." Nia gave a faint smile that barely lasted a second. "Tell that to the family's still waiting." Silence settled between them while wind rolled softly across the parking lot carrying the smell of wet asphalt and truck exhaust. Across the lot, Officer Daniel Mercer stood outside the diner speaking with Deputy Collins. He looked exhausted now. Older somehow. Like one night had peeled away years of certainty he used to wear like armor. Collins eventually walked away, leaving Mercer standing alone beside the fuel pumps. After a long hesitation, he crossed the lot toward Nia slowly. Torres noticed immediately. "Want me to stay?" she asked quietly. Nia shook her head once. Mercer stopped a few feet away, hands buried awkwardly inside his jacket pockets. For a moment he looked like he had forgotten how to speak. "I heard about the other locations," he finally said. "Storage facilities. Missing persons reports." Nia nodded slightly. "It was bigger than one county." Mercer swallowed hard. "And I almost helped cover it up." The words came out rougher than he intended. Nia studied him carefully. Shame sat heavy on his face now. Real shame. Not embarrassment. Not fear of consequences. The deeper kind. The kind that forced people to look inward after years spent looking past others. Mercer stared out toward the interstate. "When I saw you driving that truck," he shook his head slowly, "I assumed things." Nia waited quietly. "I assumed you were dangerous before I even spoke to you." A refrigerated trailer hissed loudly nearby as air brakes released into the morning air. Somewhere inside the diner, silverware clattered against plates while tired truckers ordered breakfast like the world had not tilted overnight. Ordinary life continuing beside extraordinary truth. "You were not the first," Nia said softly. Mercer looked at her. Still not an excuse. She took another slow sip of coffee before answering. "No. But maybe it is a beginning." That caught him off guard. Mercer frowned slightly. "After everything?" Nia glanced toward Sheriff Colton being escorted between federal vehicles across the lot. Even now the former sheriff walked with his head high, refusing to look broken in front of the people he once controlled. People like him survive. Because decent people convince themselves small warning signs are not their problem, she said quietly. That is how systems rot. One excuse at a time. Mercer absorbed that in silence. The morning sunlight finally broke through the clouds then, casting pale gold reflections across the wet pavement and chrome fuel tanks. For the first time all night, the truck stop looked almost peaceful. Mercer looked down at the soaked highway badge still clipped to his uniform. "I do not know if I belong in this job anymore." Nia studied him for a long moment before replying. "Maybe the better question is whether you are finally ready to do it honestly." The words stayed hanging between them while 18-wheelers thundered eastbound toward the rising sun. Mercer did not answer right away. But for the first time since the stop began, he looked less defensive and more determined. Small difference. Important one. By late afternoon, the storm had completely passed, leaving behind a washed-out Texas sky streaked with pale sunlight and long shadows stretching across the truck stop parking lot. Most of the federal convoy had already moved on toward the county offices, but a handful of black SUVs still remained near the diner while agents carried sealed evidence boxes in and out through the side entrance. The entire place smelled like wet concrete, burned coffee, and overheated engines cooling beneath the fading heat of the day. Nia Brooks stood beside her truck checking the trailer seals one final time before departure. The metal latch clicked sharply beneath her gloved hands. Simple sound. Familiar sound. After weeks undercover, ordinary truck work almost felt strange again. Across the lot, Sheriff Wade Colton sat inside the rear of a federal vehicle staring silently through tinted glass. He had not spoken much since morning. Men who spent years controlling everyone around them often became very quiet once nobody listened anymore. Agent Elena Torres stepped out of the diner holding a tablet and a thin manila folder. "You are not going to like this," she said. Nia looked up immediately. Torres handed over the folder. Inside were printed photos from another freight yard 2 counties east. More cargo vans. More missing girls connected to trucking routes. But one photograph stopped Nia cold. A grainy security image captured near Amarillo 6 weeks earlier. Her truck. Her trailer. And beside it stood a man she recognized instantly. Deputy Collins. Nia's expression darkened. "No," Torres said quietly, reading her reaction. "He was not listed anywhere in Colton's financial records." Nia looked back toward the diner windows where Collins sat alone at a booth filling out paperwork under federal supervision. Young face. Nervous posture. He looked more terrified than corrupt. That made this harder. "What is the timestamp?" Nia asked. 3:42 in the morning, Torres replied. He said Colton sent him to inspect commercial routes. Nia studied the photograph again. Collins was standing near the exact trailer where one of the victims had later been transported. Maybe he knew. Maybe he did not. That was the dangerous thing about corruption. Sometimes people participated without realizing what they were helping protect. Officer Mercer approached from the fuel pumps carrying 2 bottled waters. He handed one silently to Nia before noticing the photograph in her hand. "What happened?" Torres answered first. "Possible deputy involvement." Mercer's shoulders stiffened immediately. "Collins." Nia nodded once. Mercer looked toward the diner in disbelief. "Kid has only been on patrol 14 months. "That does not mean much," Torres said. "Systems teach people fast." Mercer stared through the diner glass where Collins sat alone rubbing tired eyes with both hands. "He looked up to Colton," Mercer muttered quietly. "Everybody did around here." Nia closed the folder slowly. That is how power works when nobody questions it. A long silence followed while trucks rolled through the interstate nearby, their engines echoing across the open highway like distant thunder. Mercer lowered his voice. "You think Collins knew what was happening?" Nia did not answer right away. She remembered the nervous laugh during the traffic stop, the hesitation near the trailer, the fear in his face after the girl was found. Fear could mean guilt, but sometimes it only meant confusion. "I think," she finally said. He stopped asking questions because trusting the sheriff felt easier. Mercer looked down at the bottle in his hand. "That sounds familiar." Nia glanced at him briefly. Honest regret looked different now than it had earlier. Less defensive. More painful. Before anyone could say another word, the diner door suddenly burst open. Deputy Collins stumbled outside looking pale as paper, breathing hard. "Agent Torres," he called out urgently. Every federal agent nearby turned immediately. Collins pointed toward the parking lot behind the diner. "One of the storage manifests is missing." Torres moved fast. "What do you mean missing?" Collins swallowed hard. "The evidence box from County Warehouse 3. Nia's eyes sharpened instantly. Warehouse 3 contained transportation records, names, routes, payments. Enough evidence to expose people far beyond Sheriff Colton. Mercer looked toward the remaining federal SUVs. Who had access? Collins shook his head frantically. "I do not know. It was there 20 minutes ago." The entire truck stop seemed to tense all over again. Nia slowly turned toward the highway beyond the parking lot. Endless traffic moving west beneath the orange evening sky. Somewhere out there, somebody already knew the investigation had reached deeper than expected. And somebody was trying very hard to stay invisible. The entire truck stop shifted back into motion at once. Federal agents moved quickly between vehicles while radios crackled with overlapping voices and hurried instructions beneath the fading orange glow of sunset. Long shadows stretched across the wet pavement as 18-wheelers continued roaring down the interstate only a few hundred yards away, completely unaware that an investigation was unraveling beside the highway diner. Agent Elena Torres stood near the folding evidence table scanning inventory sheets with sharp controlled focus. "Nobody leaves," she ordered calmly. "Lock down every vehicle still on site." 2 federal SUVs immediately repositioned themselves near the parking lot exits. Deputy Collins looked sick standing beneath the diner awning, his hands trembling slightly around the missing inventory form. "I swear it was there," he kept repeating. "I checked the box myself." Officer Daniel Mercer studied him carefully. Earlier that morning he might have dismissed the kid entirely. Now he saw something different. Fear, yes, but not deception. Nia Brooks noticed the same thing. She walked slowly toward the rear parking area behind the diner while the evening wind carried the smell of gasoline, rain-soaked dirt, and truck exhaust across the lot. The back section sat darker than the front fuel lanes, hidden partly behind delivery dumpsters and old refrigeration units humming against the building wall. Tire marks cut sharply through shallow puddles near the loading dock. Fresh tracks. Nia crouched beside them quietly. "SUV," she muttered. Mercer followed a few steps behind her. "Federal." Nia shook her head. "Too narrow." She touched the wet pavement lightly with 2 fingers. "Still fresh. Maybe 10 minutes old." Mercer scanned the shadows behind the diner. "You think somebody took the evidence and ran?" Nia stood slowly. No, her eyes narrowed toward a side service road leading behind the truck stop. "I think somebody knew exactly what box to steal. The difference mattered." Random panic looked messy. This did not. Agent Torres approached from behind carrying a flashlight. "We checked security cameras," she said. "Half the rear parking feed cut out 22 minutes ago." Mercer exhaled sharply through his nose. "Convenient." Torres handed the flashlight to Nia. "There is more." She lowered her voice carefully. The missing manifest listed names tied to transport companies in 3 other states. Nia looked toward the dark service road again, meaning somebody inside the network got warned. A heavy silence settled between them. The realization spread slowly but unmistakably. Sheriff Colton had not been the top of this operation, just the local gatekeeper. Somewhere farther up the chain, somebody with money, logistics access, and real influence had already started protecting themselves. Mercer rubbed one hand across the back of his neck tiredly. "How high does this go?" Nia answered without emotion. "High enough that people stopped asking questions a long time ago." Behind them, a federal agent escorted Sheriff Colton from the SUV toward another transport vehicle. The former sheriff walked slower now, less confident. But when his eyes briefly met Nia's across the lot, something cold still remained there. Not fear. Warning. Colton paused near the transport door and looked directly at Mercer instead. "You still think this ends with me?" he asked quietly. Mercer stared back without answering. Colton gave a faint tired smile. "That is the problem with small towns, son. Everybody thinks evil wears one face." A federal agent pushed the transport door closed before he could say more. The metal latch echoed sharply across the parking lot. Nia watched the vehicle pull away into the evening traffic beyond the truck stop. Then something caught her attention near the service road. A reflection. Tiny. Brief. Like sunlight glancing off glass. She raised the flashlight instinctively toward the darkness behind the dumpsters. Empty road. Empty shadows. But her instincts tightened immediately. Somebody had been watching. Mercer noticed her expression. "What is it?" Nia kept staring toward the road another second before lowering the flashlight slowly. "We are not alone yet." The wind shifted across the lot carrying distant thunder from somewhere far west beyond the interstate. Another storm moving in. Agent Torres' radio crackled suddenly against her shoulder. "Torres," she answered. A pause. Then her expression hardened immediately. "Say that again." Mercer stepped closer. What happened? Torres lowered the radio slowly. County Warehouse 3 just caught fire. Silence hit the parking lot again. Deep. Heavy. Final. Nia closed her eyes briefly as the meaning settled into place. Missing evidence. Dead cameras. Fire at the storage facility. Somebody was not cleaning up panic anymore. Somebody was erasing history. The highway west of the truck stop glowed orange beneath the setting sun as federal vehicles accelerated through evening traffic toward County Warehouse 3. Sirens stayed off.
No dramatic noise.
Just engines pushing hard against the growing dark while storm clouds gathered again across the Texas horizon. Nia Brooks sat in the passenger seat beside Agent Elena Torres, watching endless freight trucks thunder past through streaks of fading sunlight. The inside of the SUV smelled like damp tactical gear, black coffee, and overheated electronics from the dashboard radios constantly crackling with updates. Officer Daniel Mercer drove behind them alone in his patrol vehicle despite repeated offers to ride with federal teams. Maybe guilt was keeping him close now. Maybe determination. Sometimes they look similar. Local fire department says the blaze started near the records section, Torres said while scanning incoming messages across her tablet. Accelerant confirmed. Nia stared through the windshield silently. Too fast for panic, she muttered. Planned. Torres nodded once. Somebody knew exactly what to destroy. The convoy turned sharply off the interstate onto an industrial service road lined with abandoned freight buildings and rusted fencing stretching into the distance. Smoke already curled against the darkening sky ahead. Thick. Black. Wrong. Mercer's patrol SUV pulled beside them as they slowed near the warehouse entrance. The building sat isolated against open land, surrounded by chain-link fencing and empty loading docks stained with years of oil and rain. Red emergency lights flashed across the smoke while firefighters worked near the front structure. Water sprayed against twisted metal doors beneath the growing night sky. Nia stepped out first. Heat from the fire still radiated through the evening air despite the wind picking up again. The smell hit immediately. Burned paper. Melted plastic. Chemicals. History erased one box at a time. A fire captain approached Torres, pulling off one glove. Main records room is gone, he said heavily. Fire moved too fast. Torres looked toward the smoking structure. Any casualties? No bodies found so far. Mercer scanned the loading docks nearby. Security footage? The captain shook his head. System got fried early. Nia walked slowly along the edge of the warehouse perimeter, while firefighters continued working behind her. Something felt off. Too clean. Too efficient. Real panic usually left messes. This looked surgical. Wind pushed smoke sideways across the gravel lot, revealing fresh tire tracks cutting away from the rear loading dock toward a service exit road. Nia crouched beside them instantly. Deep tread pattern. Heavy SUV. Recent. Mercer joined her a second later. Same type as behind the diner? Nia touched the gravel lightly. Maybe. She looked toward the dark service road disappearing beyond the fence line. Whoever took the manifest came here first. Torres approached holding a partially burned sheet of paper sealed inside an evidence sleeve. This survived near the loading area. Nia studied the blackened document carefully beneath the floodlights. Most of the page was destroyed, but one line remained readable near the bottom. A trucking company name. Black Ridge Transport Logistics. Mercer frowned immediately. That company runs half the freight routes through this region. Torres nodded grimly. And according to federal records, they donated heavily to Colton's re-election campaigns. Wind whipped harder across the warehouse yard while thunder rolled somewhere far off beyond the plains. Mercer stared at the burned document. So this whole thing was protected through shipping companies? Routes, Nia corrected quietly. Warehouses. Fuel contracts. County inspections. Missing paperwork. She looked up slowly. Human trafficking survives by blending into ordinary business. The word settled heavily over the gravel lot. A freight train horn echoed somewhere in the distance beyond the industrial yards. Long Hollow. Lonely. Torres' radio crackled sharply against her shoulder. Torres here. A pause. Then her face changed immediately. Say that again. Mercer straightened. What happened? Torres lowered the radio slowly. The girl from the trailer remembers a company logo. Nia's eyes narrowed. Black Ridge. Torres nodded once. And she says she heard one more name before she escaped the van. The wind seemed to stop entirely around them. Smoke drifted upward into the dark sky while emergency lights flashed across wet gravel and twisted steel. Who? Mercer asked quietly. Torres looked directly at him before answering. Your former captain. Silence crashed down harder than the storm clouds overhead. Mercer's face drained completely. For a long second he looked like a man realizing the ground beneath his entire career had never been solid at all. Nia watched him carefully. This was the real test now. Not guilt. Choice. The storm finally returned just after midnight. Rain swept across the empty Texas highway in long silver waves while freight trucks rolled endlessly through the darkness, their headlights cutting across wet asphalt like moving stars. Two black federal SUVs sat hidden near an abandoned way station 5 miles outside Odessa, engines idling low beneath the thunder. Inside the first vehicle, Agent Elena Torres studied the illuminated tablet balanced on her knee while radio chatter murmured softly through the speakers. Captain Harold Bennett just left his property, she said quietly, heading westbound. Officer Daniel Mercer sat beside her staring through the rain-streaked windshield. His face looked older tonight than it had 24 hours earlier. The name still weighed heavily on him. Harold Bennett had trained him, promoted him, shook his hand at graduation. You are sure it is him? Mercer asked. Torres slid the tablet across the console. Security footage. Financial transfers. Freight authorizations signed over 5 years. Enough evidence to bury careers and destroy entire departments. Mercer looked away slowly. I never saw any of it. From the second SUV, Nia Brooks watched the highway in silence. Her truck sat parked nearby beneath the broken way station lights, chrome reflecting rainwater beneath the dark sky. She looked exhausted now. Not physically. Deeper than that. The kind of exhaustion that came from carrying ugly truths too long, while pretending everything around you was normal. Her phone vibrated softly in her pocket. One new voicemail. Riley. Nia hesitated before pressing play. Her son's sleepy voice filled the quiet SUV. Hey Mom. Grandma says you are still driving tonight. I hit a double in practice today. Coach said I almost made it to third. A pause. Soft breathing. Come home safe, okay? The message ended. Nia closed her eyes briefly while rain tapped gently against the windows. Somewhere out there, ordinary life still existed. Baseball practice. Homework. Bedtime. Things worth protecting. Torres' radio crackled sharply. Target vehicle approaching checkpoint. Everyone moved instantly. Headlights appeared through the storm seconds later. A black county SUV cutting through the rain toward the abandoned way station. Captain Bennett never saw the federal barricade until it was too late. Brake lights flashed red across the wet highway as agents stepped calmly into position beneath floodlights. No chaos. No shouting. Just certainty. Mercer stepped out first into the rain. Bennett emerged slowly from the county SUV moments later, water soaking through his uniform collar almost immediately. His expression hardened the second he saw Mercer standing beside federal agents. Daniel, Bennett said quietly. You too. Mercer held his gaze without speaking. Bennett looked toward Nia standing near the way station entrance beneath the lights. Recognition crossed his face instantly. The truck driver, he muttered. Nia walked forward slowly through the rain. You never really saw me before tonight, she said. Bennett almost smiled at that. Tired. Bitter. You think this changes anything? Nia stopped a few feet away. Rainwater dripped from the edge of her jacket while 18-wheelers thundered somewhere beyond the dark highway. Maybe not everything, she answered softly. But somebody had to stop pretending they did not see it. Bennett lowered his eyes briefly. Not guilt. Resignation. Federal agents escorted him toward the waiting SUVs while thunder rolled low across the plains. Mercer remained standing in the rain long after the vehicles pulled away. Finally he looked toward Nia. How did you keep doing it? He asked quietly. Driving through all this alone? Nia glanced toward her truck parked beneath the storm-dark sky. Because people counted on somebody noticing. Silence settled between them while headlights drifted endlessly along the interstate beyond the way station. America moving through the night like it always had. Mercer nodded slowly, absorbing that. Then he extended his hand awkwardly. Not as an officer. Not as authority. Just human. Nia looked at it for a second before shaking it once. Firm. Quiet. Final. An hour later, her 18-wheeler rolled back onto the interstate beneath the fading storm clouds. The road stretched endlessly ahead beneath pale moonlight breaking through the rain. Inside the cab, Riley's baseball photo still hung beside the radio. The coffee thermos rattled softly with the movement of the truck while warm air hummed through the vents. Nia rested one hand on the steering wheel and watched the empty highway open before her. No flashing lights now. No sirens. Just diesel engine, rainwater, and miles of dark American road disappearing into dawn. Somewhere behind her, systems would rebuild. Investigations would continue. People would argue on television about corruption and accountability like they always did. But somewhere else, a teenage girl was alive because one tired black woman driving freight through Texas refused to look away. And sometimes, in a country built on people passing each other without seeing, that kind of courage mattered more than power ever could.